Canadian Oil Sands, the largest company in the Syncrude Oil Sands Consortium, released its quarterly financials last week. They lost $128 million in the past 90 days, compared with the same period last year when they made a profit of $176 million. But here's a note from their financials. They, quote, recorded an additional deferred tax expense, unquote, of $120 million during that period because the Alberta NDP increased corporate taxes to 12% from 10% as of July 1st. So the company lost $128 million last quarter, of which $120 million are attributed to the NDP's revenge tax. Revenge against the oil patch that the NDP always hated and that the NDP now controls through the levers of power. So that corporate tax hike is one of 3 new revenge taxes on Alberta. They recently doubled the carbon tax that big oil companies in Alberta pay also. That's about $800 million a year amongst the oil patch. And then they have their 3rd revenge tax. I also call it the Fort McMurray tax. It's a personal tax hike they're planning for anyone in the province who earns more than $125,000 a year. I call it the Fort McMurray tax because, of course, the average income in that city is $186,000. In fact, the cost of living in Fort McMurray is so high that you qualify for social assistance at $96,000 a year. But the NDP is bringing in this revenge tax because they hate the oil patch. I mean, that's not just my opinion, that's a fact. The Alberta NDP government is being run by anti-oil extremists, not just the MLAs themselves, but their chiefs of staff brought in from Toronto and Vancouver to run the government. I remind you that the NDP chief of staff to the Minister of Energy is a former anti-oil sands lobbyist himself, who commutes in from Toronto each week. His name is Graham Mitchell. He used to lead the US-funded anti-oil group called Lead Now. Here's a reminder of the kind of anti-oil propaganda they produce.
Since then, the Harper government has stripped our environmental protections, put all our economic eggs in one risky basket, and damaged our international reputation. They've taken our country backwards.
Yeah, like I say, their new taxes are vengeance taxes implemented by Toronto and Vancouver NDP activists. And if you think their war against the oil patch is only something for corporate fat cats to worry about, well, I've got news for you. You are the fat cat that's being hurt. See, Fort McMurray is a place with 9% unemployment now. I mean, they're hurting badly. But when a company like Canadian Oil Sands loses money, that means their shareholders lose money. And yes, there are some millionaires who own oil shares, but there are an awful lot more people who own a few hundred or a few $1,000s in oil and gas stocks in their RSPs or through the CPP pension fund. Just scroll down the list of companies that the CPP is invested in. Billions of dollars all told in companies like Canadian Natural Resources, that's a big oil sands company, Enbridge and TransCanada, big oil pipeline companies, Imperial Oil, Teck Resources that just shelved a $20 billion oil sands mine last month. Literally millions of Canadians are being made poorer because of this NDP war on Alberta. Now let me acknowledge the obvious. Some of the problems in the Alberta oil patch are because of low world oil prices. That's obviously not the fault of the Alberta NDP government, no more than the Great Recession of 2008 that devastated the big 3 automakers was the fault of the Ontario government. But when that Great Recession hit in 2008 and those Ontario automakers teetered on bankruptcy, Ontario's provincial government didn't bring in new taxes on the industry, new taxes on factory workers, new corporate taxes, or a special new auto industry tax. That would have been insane. In fact, the opposite happened. The government of Ontario and the government of Canada poured billions of dollars into a bailout of those auto companies. Compare that to how the oil sands have been dealt with in their crisis. Now, first of all, no one has even suggested a multi-billion-dollar government bailout of the oil patch. That's just not the Alberta way. But to jump on with a triple tax hike and then threaten another tax hike in the form of an oil royalty review and to have all of this implemented by hired guns that the NDP brought in from other provinces, that's insane. The NDP are out to destroy the oil patch. They've just destroyed $120 million in this one company in 90 days. And they've got 4 more years to go. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.